These aren't motorcycles. They're rolling engineering monsters that break every rule of size, power, and imagination. Some people build motorcycles to go faster. Others build them to go farther. And then, there are the people you're about to see. Machines so oversized and so absurd, they almost stop feeling real. When people hear big motorcycle, most imagine a heavy cruiser, or maybe something built for long road trips. But that's not what this is. These machines live in a completely different world. Bigger engines, longer frames, tires that shouldn't even fit on two wheels. Some are built to ride, others exist almost like moving sculptures. And that's what makes this world so strange. These builders weren't trying to make transportation better, they were chasing an idea, a question. How far can you push a motorcycle before it becomes something else entirely? And trust me, some of the answers get completely out of control. A WD diesel turbo motorcycle by Sam Turner. And this is where things start getting weird. At first glance, this machine doesn't even look like a motorcycle. It looks like something that escaped from a military workshop and somehow ended up on public roads. The man behind it was Sam Turner, a diesel engine technician from Atlanta who worked for the United States Postal Service and spent years around engines, welding, and impossible ideas. Instead of chasing speed, he built around an 840 cubic centimeter V-twin diesel engine running twin turbochargers and producing only around 20 horsepower, which sounds disappointing. Until you realize power was never the point. Sam originally imagined something almost like a miniature locomotive before turning the idea into an all-wheel drive hydraulic system. And then, things got even stranger. Both wheels received power through a hydrostatic setup. The suspension used single-sided arms, airbags, and industrial-style hardware, massive tires, military details. Even the frame doubled as a hydraulic reservoir. At over 3 meters long, this thing didn't ride like a motorcycle. It felt like someone compressed heavy machinery into 2 wheels, and somehow, it worked. Fleshwound rust bike, rat rod motorcycle build. Now hold on, because the next machine went in the opposite direction. Where the last build looked engineered, this one looked abandoned, like somebody dragged old parts out of a scrapyard and decided rust was part of the design language. That's exactly the energy behind the Fleshwound rust bike from Afterbikes. Built around a Yamaha XS560 platform, this machine never tried to hide imperfections. It celebrated them. The huge rear wheel came from a 1932 Ford milk truck. The headlights came from a 1936 Chevrolet. Everywhere you look, something feels wrong, and somehow completely right. But the craziest part wasn't even the rust. Hidden inside all that chaos was a flamethrower setup hanging off the rear. Flames, vintage parts, bottle accessories, rough metal. This thing wasn't trying to be beautiful, it wanted personality. And honestly, that made it impossible to forget. TMC Dumont. And this is where reality starts bending. Former Brazilian Formula One driver Tarso Marques didn't just want to build a motorcycle, he wanted to build a statement. So instead of reaching for a normal engine, he installed a restored 1960s-era Rolls-Royce Continental 6-cylinder aircraft engine, producing around 300 horsepower. The bike was named Dumont as a tribute to Brazilian aviation icon Alberto Santos Dumont, and everything about it feels like aviation collided with science fiction. The motorcycle used a custom CVT transmission with no clutch and no manual shifting. Twist the throttle, and it simply moves. Then you notice the wheels. 2 giant 36-inch hubless wheels almost floating under a carbon fiber and aluminum body stretching over 4 meters long. It looked impossible to turn, impossible to balance. But then something happened nobody expected. It debuted at Daytona Bike Week and took Best in Show. Suddenly, this impossible machine became unforgettable. Frogman Rocket 2, 1,000 horsepower drag trike monster. If the last bike looked futuristic, this one looked angry. Tim Codall, better known as Frogman, teamed up with builder Michael Leeds and decided normal performance numbers weren't enough. So they dropped a supercharged 426 Hemi 5.8 into a handmade trike and created something that sounded less like a motorcycle and more like controlled violence. Over 1,000 horsepower. For a second, think about that. This machine could launch from 0 to 100 miles per hour in around 4.5 seconds and push toward 321 kilometers per hour. But here's the part that tells you everything. It carries a parachute, not decoration, an actual parachute to help slow it down. Wrapped in handmade aluminum and drag racing hardware, Rocket 2 became one of those vehicles that doesn't even need to move to feel dangerous. And when it appeared on Jay Leno's garage, people realized this wasn't a concept, it was real. Walt Moss Custom Trike, truck parts on 3 wheels. And somehow, we still weren't done getting bigger. Walt Moss spent decades around transportation and trucking, and instead of designing with software or computer models, he built directly from imagination. Since the late 70s, he kept asking one question: what happens if truck parts become a motorcycle? The answer looked insane. At the center sat a twin-turbo Cat 3208 diesel V8, producing roughly 600 horsepower, paired with a heavy-duty Allison transmission. Passenger seats sat beneath a canopy shaped from a semi-truck hood. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't practical. It wasn't even trying to be. And that was the whole point. People didn't slow down to avoid it. They sped up, just to see what had passed them. And somehow, the next machine gets even harder to believe. Road Dogg motorcycle, 1960s giant touring legend. Now, this next machine feels impossible for a different reason. Most giant motorcycles are showpieces. They appear once, shock everyone, and disappear. But Road Dogg actually lived on the road. Built in 1965 by William Wild Bill Gelbke, an engineer who believed motorcycles should be bigger, smoother, and capable of crossing entire states without effort, this machine became a legend. Instead of using a motorcycle engine, Gelbke installed a Chevrolet Inline-4 producing around 90 horsepower and paired it with a 2-speed Powerglide automatic transmission, including reverse gear. That alone sounded ridiculous for the era, but then people saw the size, over 5.2 meters long, around 1,490 kilograms, longer than some cars, and somehow, he rode it. When stopped, hydraulic jack stands held the machine upright because nobody was balancing this thing by foot. Once moving, it transformed into a highway machine. Gelbke reportedly covered more than 32,000 kilometers in a year, proving this wasn't garage fantasy. Today, Road Dogg survives as one of the most famous oversized motorcycles ever preserved. Monster chopper, monster truck meets motorcycle. And this is where the list stopped pretending to follow normal physics. The team at Grind Hard Plumbing Company looked at a classic chopper and apparently thought, what if it had monster truck energy? So they built one around a KTM LC8 V-twin engine, pushing roughly 160 horsepower, and created something that looked more like movie concept art than a rideable machine. Then came the tires. Massive 46-inch Mickey Thompson Baja Pro XS wheels completely changed the proportions. Normal handlebars weren't enough anymore, so hydraulic steering had to be engineered into the build. Custom swing arms, tubular trellis chassis, almost everything is fabricated from scratch, and somehow, it moved. When it appeared publicly at SEMA 2024, people weren't asking how fast it was. They were asking how something this ridiculous even existed. Big truck/tower trike, semi-truck motorcycle hybrid. If visibility on the road was the goal, this next builder may have solved it forever. Jim Gusto from Bellway Trucking had seen too many motorcycle accidents and decided to answer the problem in the most extreme way imaginable. Instead of becoming smaller and faster, he built bigger, much bigger. The result was the Tower Trike, powered by a semi-truck engine producing around 320 horsepower and weighing nearly 4,900 kilograms. This machine crossed into territory where calling it a motorcycle almost felt unfair. Truck-style controls replaced normal riding feel: pedals, steering column, air brakes, even a train horn. And then there was the fuel tank, over 300 liters of diesel capacity. This wasn't built to disappear in traffic. It was built to dominate space. Riding it looked less like motorcycle riding and more like commanding heavy equipment with handlebars. Dodge Tomahawk 510 concept motorcycle. But then Dodge entered the conversation, and everything escalated. Instead of asking how powerful a motorcycle should be, they asked something nobody expected. What happens if you install a Dodge Viper engine into one? The answer became the Dodge Tomahawk. Powered by an enormous 8.3-liter V10, producing around 500 horsepower, the machine looked less like a motorcycle and more like a supercar sliced down the middle. The claimed top speed climbed into territory most people couldn't even process, over 400 miles per hour. And then came the twist. It technically had 4 wheels. Each wheel worked independently with its own suspension setup, creating something between a motorcycle, a concept car, and an engineering experiment. Only a small number were produced and mostly remained collector pieces. This wasn't transportation. It was Dodge proving that sometimes ideas don't need permission. Gunbus 410. And somehow, the final machine brought everything back down to earth. Because unlike concepts and show builds, the Gunbus 410 was actually designed to be written. Built by Leonhardt Manufacturing in Germany, this machine carried an enormous 410 cubic inch, or 6.7-liter, V-twin engine. Claimed output pushed beyond 350 horsepower, wrapped inside proportions that looked completely unreal. Over 600 kilograms, around 3.5 meters long, huge custom wheels built only for this machine. But here's what made it different. It still behaved like a motorcycle. Not normal, not practical, but rideable. And that almost made it crazier than the concepts, because anyone can imagine giant machines. Building one that actually works, that's something else entirely. After seeing all 10, something becomes obvious. Being the biggest was never just about measurements. Some chased engineering, some chased speed, others chased attention. A few looked like military projects. Others felt more like rolling artwork. But every machine shared one thing. Somebody refused to accept what a motorcycle was supposed to be. That's why these builds stay memorable. A diesel-powered all-wheel drive experiment. Aircraft engines, monster tires, truck platforms, supercar motors. None of them followed rules. And maybe that's the real point. The biggest motorcycles aren't the largest because of dimensions. They're the largest because of imagination. These massive motorcycles prove imagination has no limits. From diesel hybrids to aircraft engines and monster truck tires, every build pushed reality further than anyone expected. They aren't just vehicles, they're giant mechanical statements. So now tell me, which one would you actually dare to ride?